Hey y'all, welcome to my channel, Bethany Brings Books. Today I am going to be doing my June wrap-up, and I actually tried to record this a few days ago and it did not turn out well at all. The angle was like really bad and it was cutting off, it was like right here, cutting off my eyes a lot, so that was a little bit frustrating because it was an hour-long video. So anyway, we're gonna try to do it again today. So here we go. I read 8 books in June, which is a lot better than I have done the past few months. There were a few of the books that were kind of small, but hey, it's 8 books. I read 8 books, you know. So I was excited that I got a little bit more reading done. So the first book that I read was Betsy by Sarah Monzon. This, I actually read the e-arc of this. Sarah had posted on her Instagram that she was looking for people to read and review it. So I was really excited to be able to do that. And I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. Y'all have heard me talk about Sarah's books before, particularly this series. This is the Sewing in Southern California series. This is the 5th book and it is the last one. Okay, y'all, I'm sorry. I had to make some adjustments to my camera. The tripod was trying to fall over. So anyway, we have these 5 friends and each book follows one of the friends. This one follows Betsy, of course, as it says on the cover. And she is a sound engineer who has this rule that she's never going to date a musician. Someone in her family was hurt by a musician, like she has a past history with musicians, and she just looks through this, like, has this biased view of musicians because of her experience with them. And so when Asher comes into her sound studio looking for a sound engineer for his Christian band, she immediately is kind of like, no, I don't want to work with a musician. His band is about to go on their first tour, and so he's looking for someone to be their sound engineer. But after she gives it a little bit of thought, she realizes that she could use the money, and so she agrees to go. And we see kind of just them on tour together as they begin to like be attracted to each other, and she's working through all of her feelings toward musicians, and she like comes to grasp the bias that she has and how it's not different than the bias that people have shown towards her as a Latino. It deals with some of those topics like that, like bias, and her realization that she's kind of doing the same thing toward Asher. We see their attraction for each other and her like initial no way, and then her beginning to realize that he just completely does away with like all of the biased notions that she had about musicians, and she realizes that he really is a good guy and a great musician and all of that. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. It's not my favorite in the series. I would say my favorite is probably Amanda, the book before this. I just enjoy her story. She deals with like autoimmune disease, and this is a second chance romance, and the male character is so sweet, and so I really like that. I kind of related a little bit to some of the autoimmune issues, and it was a different story than you see typically, so that one was my favorite. But this one was good too. I would definitely recommend Sarah's books, and especially the series. These are really cute, fun, romantic comedies, and I'm just sad that the series is ending. But if you want any author to support, her books are really fun, and I did enjoy the series. I enjoy how, even though they're fun rom-coms, she deals with other topics. Like, she's not afraid to tackle other topics and like deeper issues than we see a lot of times in Christian fiction. She also, like, her characters come from different points of view, and they have different points of view, and not always things that I might agree on like certain social issues, or even there's like one of the books follows a character who is very like eco-friendly, I guess. Like, she kind of gets on her friends' nerves at times because she's so like save the environment. But I like how Sarah just kind of weaves them all together, and they don't let their differences hurt them as friends. You learn that they get along and they're friends, and they have different points of view, and it broadens your worldview when you read stuff like that. And so, anyway, that's the first book I read. Then I read Anne of the Island. I finished this one. I actually started this one in May, I believe. This is the third in the Anne series. And I loved this book so much. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. I enjoyed this one better than the second one. Anne, at this point, has decided to give up her teaching position and go back to college. And we follow that journey as her and Gilbert and several of their classmates that they grew up like going to school with, they all go. Priscilla, I can't remember her last name, but Priscilla, she was a friend of Anne's in the series, she gets to go too. We see a new character named Felipes who's going to college, and Anne meets her, and she's a very, like, she's kind of annoying, but at the same time you can't help but love her type of character. And the first few chapters when they meet her and like some of their dialogue, it's so funny. It just makes me laugh out loud. But anyway, so I love Ellen Montgomery's writing style. I just love her writing. This one does cover several years. It basically covers Anne's whole time at college. And we also see her and Gilbert's relationship begin to change. Gilbert is really developing feelings for her, and she can sense the change, but she doesn't want things to change. She wants them to be friends. And so we see all of that addressed, and kind of what happens with that, and with her and Gilbert, and it was good. I loved it. You need to read the Anne series if you haven't read it. Then I read two middle grade books. I Survived the Shark Attacks of 1916. This is the second book in the I Survived series. I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with the I Survived series, but if you're not, each book covers a different event or time period in history, and she writes in like a fictional character into the real story, and you just see like their perspective of that time and that event and what happened. And this one is the shark attacks of 1916, which I have read about them since I was young. I've been fascinated with sharks since I was young, and shark attacks especially. So I would watch like Shark Week and the specials that Discovery did about this story and about sharks in general. And so when I saw this book, it's been a while, several years ago, I was like, I need to read that. So it is a fun little book. I would have adored this when I was young if it had been around. And we just follow this young boy who he goes to New Jersey to stay with his uncle, I think, for the summer. And as he's making new friends and stuff, they like enjoy swimming in the creek and all of that, and it brings them into an encounter with the sharks. And we see like the story of what happened with the sharks. And this story is actually those shark attacks of 1916 is actually what Jaws is based on, I think, which I've never watched Jaws, but I know that that's what it was based on. There were like several shark attacks out in the ocean, and then also in this creek, what they called a creek, I think, kind of like a channel that led into the ocean. And at this period in time, what is crazy is that people didn't believe that sharks attacked humans. Like, they thought that they did not attack humans. So when the attacks first started happening, they didn't believe that it was a shark attack, and then they keep happening, and they realize, oh, this is a shark. You know, this is a shark attacking these people. And so, like, several people died. I think 4 or 5, maybe. But anyway, I thought it was a good read for for middle grade age kids. They would love it. It would be a fun read for them. And then I read the Trouble on the Orphan Train from the Imagination Station series. This is by Focus on the Family, and it's supposed to be an Adventures in Odyssey series that takes place in the Imagination Station. There's like this series, Adventures in Odyssey, that Focus on the Family has done for like 30 years. 30 or 40 years, and I grew up listening to it. I loved it, still love it, and it's like an adventure series set in a little town, and it's just really good, fun series that also teaches a lot of biblical values to children. And this series was not around when I was younger. This is like a book series, and each book, I think these 2 cousins, Patrick and Beth, travel in each book in the Imagination Station, which is kind of like a time machine, and they travel on different adventures to different events and periods in history. It very much gives me the Magic Treehouse vibes, but from like a biblical worldview. This one is about an orphan train. We see Patrick and Beth, they end up on this orphan train, and more of the story kind of focuses on the fact that the train is possibly going to be robbed by Jesse James. So we see more of that, like the outlaw aspect, the orphans. I mean, I think that's supposed to be like the main story, but we don't get a ton of it. It's woven in there, and we see like the story, and they tell the story of how the orphans are going to be taken out west to find families. But I think the main thing in this to really like grab a kid's attention would be the whole Jesse James storyline. But I think this one is for ages 7 and up, and I would have loved this series when I was a kid. I would have loved it. Then I read The Beautiful Ashes of Gomez. So this I've mentioned a few times. I was supposed to read it in May for the Christian Fiction-a-thon, but I did not get around to it, so I read it in June. So this one is, I'm trying to figure out where to start. It's a unique story. So it's written by Bookstorm, a male author, which I don't read a ton of just because there's not a lot of male authors in Christian fiction. I enjoy reading stuff by male authors, and I wish there were more in Christian fiction, but this is one of the few I've read in a while. I think the last one I read was probably Robert Whitlow, I think. Anyway, that's just a total rabbit trail. But anyway, it's written by Bookstorm. So there are 3, I would say 3 to 4 main characters that we follow in this book. We follow Gomez, Father Jake, and Honey, and Early. So let me explain. Gomez, Father Jake, and Early were friends before this book opens up. They were like friends who did rodeos together. Early ends up as a police detective in this, or a police officer in this Arizona town. And Father Jake is a priest. Gomez is the main character in the book, who he is an alcoholic who has been living in the bushes out on the edge of town, drinks all the time, and lives out there like in a little shack that he threw together with his wife's ashes in a can. So his wife was killed in a car accident like 5 years before the book opens up, And we see very quickly that Father Jake was involved in the accident that killed her, which has led to Gomez basically hating Father Jake, and Father Jake went into the priesthood, so he was not a priest until this accident happened. Before the accident, he was in a very close relationship with one of the waitresses in the town at a diner. Her name is Honey, and after the accident, the guilt just made him feel like he couldn't pursue a relationship with her and that he needed to devote himself to being a priest. And so the storyline that we're following is that there is this man in town named Sonny who is kind of like a boss hog figure, runs the town, thinks that everyone in town answers to him, and he's trying to kick Gomez off of the piece of property that he's staying on, because Sonny wants to expand his car dealership as well as try to bring some other growth to the town. The book is very plot driven. I have another video coming out soon where I'm doing a tag, and in it I like researched a little bit about plot driven versus character driven, just because I wasn't exactly sure I knew what the difference was. And after reading about that, this book I feel like is definitely plot driven. It has a lot of very quirky characters. The dialogue is different at times, especially since we're in Gomez's head, and most of the time he is drunk. I mean, we're not always in Gomez's head. There is like other characters' point of view, but a lot of it from his perspective is very quirky. And even the scenes that you're not in his head, if the characters are interacting with him, they're still quirky just because of the conversations. So there's definitely a lot of quirk to it. A lot of, it's just kind of zany, I guess. And not in a way like it's meant to be funny. It's not meant to be like hilarious. It's just, I guess, the topics that it's dealing with. It's set, like I said, in Arizona, in this like desert town, and so it gives off very much like Route 66 vibes. I saw some descriptions describe this as Americana. Very much, you think about, y'all are probably gonna think this is so cheesy, but the movie Cars. Sorry guys, had another interruption, so hopefully the angle hasn't changed too much and doesn't look too weird. But anyway, so going back to this book, if you think about like that movie Cars, where what is the main character's name? Lightning McQueen. When he goes to like that desert town on Route 66, like out in the middle of nowhere, that's the vibes that I get with this town. Very much like that whole feel. But the story is very plot driven. I think the main focus that we are seeing is Sonny trying to drive Gomez off this piece of property. We also see Father Jake realize that he still has feelings for Honey, and he's trying to figure out like what should he do with that whole situation. And then he's still dealing with his broken friendship with Gomez, and so it's definitely some more serious, like sad themes, I guess. The ending has several twists that I did not see coming. And in the very end, I would have to say I didn't like how it ended exactly. Like, I was hoping for a little bit, I don't know, I was just hoping for one of the characters to maybe be in one of the next books in the series, and like their story be a little different, and it ended in a way that that's not going to happen. And so that was sad. I didn't really care for like how it ended. I did cry. So I think I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. I'm glad I read it because it was a unique story, and it's definitely a story that will stick with me just because it was so unique. I would like to read the rest in the series. The second one follows Early, who is the detective, and his character is really funny to me in this book. He kind of makes me think about the guy on that old cop show. Is it Chips? Is that what it's called? The dark-headed cop. I can't remember his name because I don't know. He just kind of reminds me of him. But anyway, he's a fun character, and I would like to read his story. And then there is a third book that I didn't even remember. I have pre-ordered it, so I don't even know who it's about, and I've pre-ordered it. So, so anyway, I'll be reading that one. But I'm gonna unhaul this just because I don't think I'll ever read it again. Even though, like I said, I did enjoy reading it. But because, and I keep getting sidetracked, because it was so plot driven, it was hard for me to really connect with the characters and get in their head. Even though the characters are very quirky and interesting, it was just hard for me to really connect with them. So that was the other aspect that I didn't really care for. But overall, I did enjoy it. It kept me interested, and I'm glad I read it. I just probably wouldn't read it again. But like I said, I do want to finish the rest in the series. And also, there was a few things, like theologically, that I didn't quite jive with. I don't know, just a few things that I didn't really agree with. But there's that. Then I also read A Light on the Hill by Connellan Cossette. This is the first in the Cities of Refuge series. This is my first biblical fiction that I've read in quite a while. I don't read a ton of biblical fiction. I have some that I do want to read, like several, but it's not like my go-to that I pick up. But I really did enjoy this one, and it made me want to like get into some more biblical fiction. This series, when I saw what it was about, I was very intrigued to try it, because it's funny, when I was younger, growing up, I would read my Bible and I would read about the cities of refuge, which in the Old Testament, when the children of Israel went into Canaan and began to set up like the tribal lands there, God commanded them to have these certain cities that could be a place of refuge for someone who was accused of something such as like what we would consider like involuntary manslaughter or something like that, like accidentally killing someone. They could run to these cities to be safe from the family of the victim, because the family of the victim would hunt them down and like try to get retribution or revenge for the death of their loved one. And so the person who is involved in this could run to these cities as a refuge, and as long as they stayed in this city, they were safe. If they came out, then the family could go hunt them down and harm them, but they had to stay in the city until the high priest died. And so that's what we see here. Moria is the main character, and the book starts off with her being told by her father that he has found someone for her to marry. Something obviously that was, common then. Their parents arranged marriages for them. So when she meets this man, there is some very unfortunate things that happen, and because of what happened, there is a death involved in the whole situation, and she has to flee to one of these cities of refuge. And basically that is what this story is following, her journey fleeing. And then there's another character who is related to the man that she was going to marry. It's his brother, and he ends up on this journey with her to the city of refuge because he wants to see justice done. He don't necessarily just want to get revenge, but he wants actual justice and the law to be followed. And so we see their journey together. I gave it, so I struggled a lot with rating this just because some of the story felt kind of generic to me, and a little bland, I guess. But as we got more into the story, there were some aspects that really interested me, and just as they travel, I thought that was like they meet like a band of people traveling, and just seeing some of that, like as they meet these merchants and they go into the city, and just some of the interactions and things that take place there, that was a little more interesting to me and did keep my attention. I loved the whole biblical aspect of it, and like feeling like I was immersing myself into that culture and learning more about the culture and the time period, and all of that really fascinated me. But there were some parts that fell a little flat for me, and so that was why I didn't rate it higher. I think I gave it 3 to 4 stars. If I were to rate it like not on Goodreads, I would say probably 3.5 stars. But yeah, I did enjoy it, and especially the end. I think the ending really, there was this one part that really just kind of stuck out to me. She's talking to her love interest. There's like the fear of, you know, he's gonna have to go out. What if he goes out to battle and war and stuff? What if something happens to him? And kind of like her realization that she just has to trust God. And I think for me, I really connected with that in the sense that when you lose someone, like when I lost my husband, you really, if it's someone really close to you and it's sudden like that, unexpected, then you really develop a fear of losing other loved ones. And there's even the fear of relationships, because eventually you're going to lose them unless you go first. And so there's just this whole aspect of fear that comes along with life, but at times it can cripple you. And so just, I don't know, something connected with me and clicked in my mind with that, and I kind of was like, you know what, I think about back in that time period where there was so much uncertainty, and they were living in, like, you know, war was going on constantly, and they were always in fear of someone, other people's coming in and like fighting them and going to battle and going to war. You see it all in the Bible, and so like in the Old Testament, and so they always had that fear of losing a loved one, but they still, you know, they had to go ahead and just trust God and appreciate the time that they were given. And I think that was what really clicked with me, was that just appreciating what you've been given by God and the time that you have been given with those that you love. And it's all in His hands, and He understands our pain and our heartache when we do lose someone we love. But I can make the choice to just be thankful for that time I did have with them, and the time that I have now with my loved ones, and enjoy it and just trust God whatever happens. So anyway, all of that, that kind of stuck in my head at the very end. But yeah, I would definitely like to finish this series, and I did enjoy this book. Then I very quickly read Felipes Court. This is the second book in the Clavering Chronicles by Jenny Goutet. So her books for me are really very easy reads. She is a Regency author, and she actually lives in France, which is interesting to me. I love her writing style. It's very characteristic of the time period, the language and everything, the dialogue. I really enjoy it, and they're just sweet stories. I don't know how to explain it, but to read a book that's just, it's a sweet story. There's like no huge mystery in the plot, or no big event that's happening. It's just a sweet story, if that makes any sense, if you understand what I'm saying. That's kind of what this is. We have Philippa, who is currently living with her sister because her father died and her mother has remarried. It's time for her to be introduced to London society. It's like her second season in London society. And so her sister is kind of like her caretaker to help her choose a spouse. And so Felipa is kind of like not really interested in marriage at this point. She is more of the mindset to do some matchmaking, which she begins to try to do with one of her close friends. Her sister is also an extremely dislikable character. She was in the first book as well, which follows Felipe's brother, and we're introduced to her in there, and she's very annoying. And so we see her, she's trying to scheme to like get Felipa attached to a certain gentleman that Felipa is not interested in. And Felipa is trying to matchmake with her friend, and she's been spending like a lot of time in her friend's home, and her friend's family is kind of what they call in the book different. Like, they don't really live up to all of the expectations of London society. Her mother is very active in like social causes, and Felipa's friend, her friend's name is Susan. Susan has a brother who seems to be more the head of the household than Susan's parents. And so as Felipa spends a lot of time at Susan's house, she's introduced to Susan's brother, and they kind of clash. He is in Parliament, and he has also decided that he wants a wife to help his political ventures. And so as him and Felipa clash, there's also this attraction, and she begins to help, like, her and Susan take on this project to do some redecorating in the house, and he sees this as a way to also advance his like political thing. Like, he wants to have a dinner to kind of help his political career, and in particular a bill that he's trying to get passed in Parliament. And so that's kind of the gist of the story. It's just follows all of those events and their relationships that develop, and it was just really sweet, very, very, very clean, just extremely clean and sweet, and I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to read the third book in the series. And then the last book that I read, I actually finished this July 1st, but I'm going to count it because it's really thin, and I was trying to finish it the night before, and it did not. I fell asleep. So and that is Loving the Little Years, Motherhood in the Trenches by Rachel Jankovic. I picked this up probably a thrift store, I'm not sure. And it's basically like this woman who, at the time she wrote this, which was like 12 years ago, she wrote it. She had a 5-year-old, 4-year-old, 2-year-old twins, and a 5-month-old. And so she's kind of just talking about motherhood, like when you're in that time of life where you've got all these littles and everything it feels like you're in the trenches, and basically just some encouragement and tips. There are some things that I definitely found interesting and helpful, particularly just kind of, she talked about a little bit about not getting frustrated and blaming our kids for things that are not their fault. And it was interesting because it was something that I'd already been thinking about, like before I even read it. A few days before I read it, I've been thinking about it, but such as, like, for example, myself, a lot of times I get really frustrated if we're running late for church and my kids are like dawdling and not getting in the car and taking their time to buckle up, and and I'm like, get in the car, we're running late. And then I thought the other day, I was just thinking about that, you know what, it's not their fault we're late. I should have gotten up earlier, or I should have managed my time better, and I don't need to get frustrated with them because it's not their fault. And she kind of brought out that same topic, that we need to address things within us before we take things out on our kids. And we shouldn't take things out on our kids anyway, but circumstances, there are times that we blow up at our kids, and it's really not even their fault. The situation's not their fault, and we need to really recognize and deal with the sin in us before we try to address things with our kids. And so there were aspects like that I did enjoy. There were a few things she addressed for teens, which I thought was a little, I don't know, out of her element at the time, because at the time she was a mother to kids, so, you know, toddlers, and so I thought that was a little out of her element. I'm not one of those people that thinks you have to have gone through something to be able to teach on it or whatever, but I know for me personally, I don't feel like I could give advice on raising a teenager because I've never raised teenagers, so, anyway, there were just a few little things like that I didn't care for, and just some things that I felt were a little off base, but overall, I'm glad I read it, and I did glean some good things from it. I will be unhauling it though, because I know I'm not going to read it again. But anyway, that is what I read, and thank y'all for watching. I had a fun month. I had a few other books that I read and didn't finish. One of them was Encounters, I don't know where it's at right now, but Encounters with Jesus by Timothy Keller. I'm still reading that. I'm probably about 60% done now. Really, really, really enjoying it. So good. I thought I was going to finish it last month, but I didn't. And so that's one that I'm reading. And then also still reading The Scarlet Letter. I've actually finally gotten into it more, and it's intrigued me, so that's where I'm at. But anyway, thank y'all for watching, and I enjoy talking about the books that I read in June with y'all. Bye.